episode of the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. I'm Deborah Deras, your host, helping you to take your expertise and to monetize your magnificence. And I know many of you have been writing into me saying, Deborah, I'm ready to launch my online course. I'm finally going to go online, create that extra stream of passive income. Well, one of the things that I'm really excited about is I have a system called Kajabi, and I am able to give every one of the listeners a 28-day free trial. So I am going to be putting the link down below, and you are going to be able to try it out, because I don't believe in investing in anything that you're not going to use. But for those of you that have been procrastinating, what I call the mañana juanas, now is the time to get started. And it doesn't have to be a huge course. It could be a mini 2-minute video course, but I highly encourage you to take action, to do it, to delegate it, to get it done, because I believe that sincerely every one of you have a message, and that you are that messenger that needs to be heard. And now is the time more than ever to get that out. So we are back with another very, 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 very special guest. It's like a long-awaited guest. We were going to be together in March, and there's emergency, and then I had emergency in April. Then we're in a pandemic. But this is someone super special to me, because earlier in the year, when we actually had the pleasure of speaking on a stage, I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Sasha Shulkat, and she was an amazing speaker at this Nazarian Institute Think Big conference. And before I even knew that she was speaking, every single time I would go into the hallway, I would run into her. I'm like, oh my God, you have such a beautiful dress. And she's like, oh, I love your outfit. And we just had so much synergy, right, Sasha? Just like instantly, like synchronicity, whether we were going to both be speakers and meet each other that way, or whether we were just going to run into each other and compliment each other in the hall. This is the kind of woman Dr. Sasha is, and I want to formally introduce you to her to let you know that Dr. Sasha Shulkat is a cardiac anesthesiologist, a tenured professor, and the vice chair of strategy and innovation in the Department of Anesthesiology at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Sasha is the CEO and founder of Brave Enough, and she is a well-published researcher in cardiac anesthesiology, gender equity, love it, an international speaker and author of Between Grit and Grace, The Art of Being Feminine and Formidable, and she's also a TEDx speaker. Please help me welcome Dr. Sasha.
Thank you. That is so sweet. I'm so happy just to be energized, because I know for the next few minutes you and I are going to be talking and breaking down some really cool, important things. And you are such a ball of energy that you give me energy. So
good.
I've been looking forward to this dopamine hit for weeks.
Oh, good. I love it. I love it. So, yeah, and you know that I just get so excited to be able to share and inform and inspire people. So that's why I love doing this podcast. And I love getting to connect with amazing women like you. I mean, I'm so grateful that you have the time, being a doctor during the time of pandemic and being someone like you that is supervising so many people. What is it like for you now, and what do people need to know about the times we're going through?
Well, it's definitely challenging because we in medicine are very scripted, and we have protocols, and we're very efficient in what we do. And that's all kind of been wiped away with the unknown of the pandemic.
Right.
And just the information coming to us every day changes. What we did a month ago is not the right thing to do anymore. So we're constantly having to be really flexible and open, and go into every day with open hands, I say, and just, it's really hard to have an ego when your hands are open and you're standing like this. It's easier to accept help and reality. And so it's, I don't want to say that it's easy. It's not, it's a little stressful, but I really feel like now is the time for us to shine in healthcare, and for us to step up and to kind of see the leaders, see who's really emotionally intelligent and mature and rising to the top. And maybe it wasn't who has titles. And so I think that it's a time for us to just step forward and really go back to the roots of why we went into medicine, which was very basic, to help people. And
Right.
so for me, it's kind of been an awakening of what I love about medicine. And just having to kind of go back to being humble and just having open hands and just saying, I'm going to do the best today.
I love that. Yeah, one of my favorite books is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
four agreements is just always do your best. And it's my sweetheart is also a healthcare worker, and just he's like, well, today we're doing this, and yesterday we did this, and now we have no PEPE, and now the nurses got a whole bunch donated, and we've got more than enough. And if you,
Yeah.
it's just really, really a stressful time for everyone, but especially for you putting your lives on the line and also trying to save lives. And
You
how,
know, it's really interesting because people keep asking me like, how are you dealing with that fear? But
right.
honestly, Deborah, I have not, from day one, I have never been afraid that I was going to contract COVID. Isn't that,
Uh-huh.
I'm being totally honest. Like, I've never thought to myself, driving to the hospital, driving home, I'm more afraid of transmitting it to my family
Right.
somehow, or I'm more afraid of making a mistake in
Right.
how I care for someone.
Right.
And so I think, we've had at our hospital, we've had no one contract it. Not one single healthcare worker has contracted COVID from a COVID patient because we're doing the appropriate things, which to me tells me that it's something that we're going to figure out. We're going to learn how to treat. We're going to be okay. And I see a lot of hope in that.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. And all the people that I know in healthcare are not scared either. Like, it's like my mom is a speech therapist, 72 years old, going into nursing homes. I'm like, Mom,
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, there's old people in there. She's like, I'm old too. She's like, she's like, I would go into the hospital if I could. It's because
Right.
when you take that Hippocratic oath, I mean, you are of service, and that's who you are as beings. You wouldn't go into that industry if you weren't, but it's such a part of your story. And listening to your TEDx talk again for the third time
Oh, you're
today,
so sweet.
yeah, and that's one of the things that really inspired me to have you on the podcast, because doing a TED talk and becoming a speaker when you're a physician, and just the story that you have, how did that come about?
Well, it's interesting because I always say, like, I may be the only physician that got a TED talk talking about her biggest failure.
Mm.
But I think that for me, I had a very negative clinical outcome, which I talk about in the TED talk early in my career. And it shaped me because I hid it. And it limited me because I didn't talk about it with anybody because I was terrified to, and because I had PTSD from it, quite frankly. Um, I I didn't talk about it, and it limited my forward progress in my career. I would say no to opportunities because I would be afraid to be on a stage in front of too many people, that somebody would out me. I had terrible imposter syndrome. And more and more, it started to become a problem because I was gaining success. So when you have a career failure or a personal or professional failure that you think is unforgivable, that you
Right.
see as like this huge X on your life, the more successful you get, the more that X becomes so big and looms over you and holds you back. And it can be anything. It could be a divorce. It can be loss of getting fired from your job. It's different for every person, but what you perceive as like your biggest failure in life. And so I knew at a pivotal point in my career that I had to process this. And the way that I learned how to process it and really forgive myself was to talk about it. The first
Yeah.
time I talked about it on a stage was in front of a group of about 100 women doctors. Thank goodness it was women doctors because they're so compassionate. Not that men
Right.
aren't, but the women I felt really safe around. And I shared my story, and I couldn't even get through it without just tears.
Mm.
And after that, I was so afraid that I would never be asked to speak again. I got so much, the women were lined up to tell me their stories of failure. And it was like a light bulb went off because so many of these women that I actually knew, some of them thought of them as like these amazing women that I put on a pedestal, also had stories of failure. And I thought something is wrong in medicine that we can't talk about our failures.
Mm.
And that's when I really started studying resilience, and I really started studying what that was. And I started sharing and speaking about it. And the more I spoke about it, the more I got asked to speak about it. And the more comfortable
Ah,
I became speaking about it. And I can tell you, like, I just gave a talk a couple months ago to a room that was 97% male surgeons. So there were like 10 women in the room, hundreds of male surgeons. And after I gave my talk about failing and my biggest failure, the men were lined up, some of them with tears, saying, I've had a similar story I've never shared with anyone. So I
wow.
think it's when we share our stories, and when we share, when we do what you're doing here, getting people on to talk about things, professional overcoming things, adversity, we open up the door for other people to share their stories and heal. And that's where you get success, when you're okay with, yeah, that happened to me years ago. I'm okay. It doesn't define me.
Right. And I love the concept of failure. I studied NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And in NLP, the presupposition is failure is feedback, that it's giving you information on how to course correct. And many people that want to get into the speaking industry don't start because they don't think that they're perfect, or it's that imposter syndrome. No one's
Mm-hmm.
ever going to feel perfect. And anytime I go on stage, even at the Nazarian Institute, I'm like, oh my God, Kris Jenner's here. Sheila's like the bomb.com. Sheila Nazarian, like I'm going to share a stage with her. And I had spoken the last year. But that little voice, that ego that's not our amigo, that comes up that says, who are you to do this? When you
Uh-huh.
first got that invitation to speak for those 100 women, what preceded that? Like, how did they even know about you to ask you to speak?
Well, it was funny. I had been speaking for academically on anesthesia topics and cardiac topics for a while. So I was pretty comfortable giving academic talks, which is very different than sharing, from your own story.
Right.
And when the person asked me to speak, I said, I actually kind of want to talk about this other thing. And I have to give her credit. She gave me the opportunity to do that. But that's what kind of like opened, that was a pivotal moment for me, because it was a change in my direction of my career. Because
Right.
before that, I talked about very safe topics, very academic, very structured, very black and white, no opinion, no feeling, no stories, nothing personal. And it it honestly was terrifying. Like, and I mean, if you look back at that lecture, it's not like my best lecture. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I had to stop and gather my thoughts. I'm a much better speaker now, but to your point, it was the start. It was the beginning. And if I hadn't
Right.
taken that small step of just putting myself out there and being brave enough to do the first thing, even though it wasn't perfect, I wouldn't be standing on stages speaking to thousands of people now. So
Right.
it's so important that we don't let that limit us. Like, nobody's perfect. That's part of the human race. Thank goodness we're not
Right.
perfect, right? So
Right.
just take that step forward.
And I love the fact that you talk about that when you speak things, it takes away the energy of them. Because as
Mm-hmm.
somebody that I'm a spiritual counselor and I would volunteer in these 12-step programs, and they would always say that addiction is because of your secrets. We're as sick as our secrets. And that when we
Mm.
speak them out loud to even one other person, that it takes away the guilt or the shame. And then we're able to be free and liberated from
It's
that.
It's so true. And I love that. I love that you're as sick as your secrets, because, um, what's interesting is I did that first talk for me. A lot of it was for me. I stood on that stage and I found the courage to tell my story as part of my healing. But I had no idea that it was going to open this huge door for other people to heal. And I still get emails and messages from people who have heard my story, I mean, almost weekly, that say, I finally told my spouse about this. I finally told my coworker and shared this story about how I made a mistake and I lost this patient, or I blamed myself for not doing this thing,
Mhm.
or for failing in this. And it's so interesting, because I didn't think I was going to stand up there and heal people.
Right.
I thought I was going to heal myself,
Good. Right.
but
Right.
but it's so powerful when you share something like that, because you give other people, you empower other people to share their story.
Yeah, the victory and the vulnerability, right? To be
Hmm.
honest and authentic. When I first started speaking, I would hold back a lot of the like not so great stories and I would share, and I realized where people really connected me was the hot mess stories. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
no, it's
so
true.
you lost your house during the divorce? So did I. You know what I mean? It's like, no, but it was like I only wanted to tell the rosy parts, but it's
Mhm.
so important. And I love what I love also about you is how you're so committed to empowering women and gender
Mhm.
equity and all that females go through in a male dominated industry. And that's why you created the conference Brave Enough, right? One of the
Mhm.
inspirations for that. Can you talk about your inspiration for that?
Yeah, I kind of felt like at this pivotal point where I couldn't forgive myself. I had this massive failure. At the same time, I was really burning out in medicine. So it all
Mm,
kind of came to a point about 6 or 7 years ago. And at that time, I realized that I healed myself over about a year. I took myself through a very healing process, and I really came out of of a dark place. But at the end of that year, what I lacked was women friendships. And I'm a very extroverted person. Like, you met me at a conference and I stopped you in the hallway to tell you how cute I loved your outfit. Like, I'm super extroverted and I've always had lots of friends.
right,
But when you're not well and when you're hurting, you
right,
start to withdraw and you think nobody wants to be around you. You convince
right.
yourself of that, right? So I
Exactly.
had really isolated myself. So I started with just building a group of 10 women doctors. I asked 10 women, do you want to be my friend? Literally in a text. And that grew to a Facebook group which has 12,000 doctors in it now.
Oh,
And
wow.
through that, I started building my company Brave Enough so that I could have events and we could come together and learn and then also mentor and sponsor one another. And that's what I do with the Brave Enough conference and my work with the company that I own. So I created the company I needed, right? Just
Right,
like what you've done. You've created the company you needed to be successful. Now you're giving that to so many, you're giving your talents and your wisdom and your knowledge to so many other people to become successful.
right,
So that's what really empowered me, because I saw in the area that I work in healthcare, as I started to climb the ladder, it started to become really lonely, lonely
mm.
and lonely and lonely. And I thought, where are all the women? Like, I'm by myself, like, where are my girlfriends? So I wanted to create a company where I could empower women in their own environments to really kind of climb that ladder together and to
Right.
pull one another up and push each other forward.
Yes, so important. I mean, and that's, my company is called Synergy Unlimited. So it's all about, we're better together, and with the power of synergy, anything is possible, because it can seem daunting and overwhelming and like you're the only one going through something, right? And so when
Yes.
you come together collectively in the Facebook group and at the conference, like it's just that's where people feel liberated. It's like, oh, I
Yes.
can do it. And then everybody goes to the next level. Everybody
Mhm.
rises. It's just so I didn't know there's 12,000 people in your Facebook group. And I've been reading your blogs last night because I was like, work-life balance. How does she do this with kids? I do a lot, but I have no kids. So like, tell me how you are a doctor and then also speaking, getting paid to speak and going around and then doing a conference. How do you balance? And then we'll talk more about the conference.
Well, I definitely, I'm not going to lie, it's hard work.
Yeah.
It's work. You got to work. You got to put in the work. And I don't think that there's been times in my life where I've been successful at different things. So I don't want to give out this illusion that you can do it all and have it all and be amazing all the time, because I think
Right.
that there's definitely times where you're going to be more focused on your speaking or more focused on your writing. But I do have very good time management skills. I will say that I've developed a very succinct pattern of every Sunday I sit down and I plan my week and I look at white
Mm,
space in my week, and I don't, kind of burn an hour here or there. Like, I really use my time, and I see time as money, very, very bluntly.
mm,
And I see how valuable 1 hour of my time is. And so
right.
if I am going to, waste an hour, I think about, like, okay, what could I have been doing during this hour? That also, if someone's asking me to commit to something that I don't think aligns with my goals, so I'm very goal driven, I'm very vision driven. I say no. And so I've gotten
Right.
better at saying no. And that's allowed me to open up my time to do things like this. And because this aligns with my vision. So
Right.
I think you have to have a vision for yourself. Like, what are your
Absolutely.
goals? What's your vision? And everything has to fall into that. And I didn't always have great time management skills, but I do now. I'm pretty strict about them. And I really take every Sunday to plan out like what my week looks like and what's on my calendar and what do I need to be aware of. Like if I have a crazy day on Wednesday, where's my 1 or 2 hours that I'm going to take to myself on Thursday so I don't burn out. So that's equally important, working in that time for yourself.
I love it. I don't know if you know this about me, but my first book that I wrote was called Confessions of an Adrenaline Addict. And it was when I was hospitalized for burnout because my adrenals had burnt. And I was only
Oh
20.
my,
I was only
oh my
25.
goodness.
And they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They're like Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. And it was really adrenal burnout from just because I just did not have a stop switch. And I was really a people pleaser. And I was doing it because I wanted to prove to whoever, my dad, whoever. He told me when I was in the hospital, you don't have to prove to me. I was like doing a triathlon, going to school, working full time, doing an internship. And it was just like killing me. And so look at my door. See that little flip chart? It
Yeah.
says the last chapter of my book is saying no. Like there's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that FOMO, even on
Mm-hmm.
lockdown, it's like, oh my God, there's this Zoom party, that Zoom party. I want to be on everything, right?
I know.
And so as type A personalities, to be able to say no to things, it's really empowering because then
Mm-hmm.
you could say yes to your vision and your dream and your company. And you're so inspiring because I know a lot of people that are listening are speakers that want to get paid, they want to do it. And sometimes you have to create your own conference and have your own movement,
Yeah.
and then you build it, they will come. So
Yes.
you were speaking first and then you did the Brave Enough conference, correct?
Yes. Well, I was speaking academically, and I think this is really important. So I
Yes.
had speaking skills,
Right.
but I can tell you that the first time I pitched that I was going to have a women's conference on
Mm.
for women, I literally was told this: you don't have street credibility with women. You don't have a degree in women's
Oh,
studies.
come on.
You're not. And I'm like, and I honestly believed that person. I was like, oh yeah, maybe I should go to school and get a degree
No.
in women's studies because I think that they couldn't grasp that you can be two things at once. That
Right.
I can be a cardiac anesthesiologist and also lead a conference for women. I can do both of those things. It's too
Right.
much for some people to grasp that you can do, like you have a degree in lingual science, but you also have this amazing company. You do so many things because you're multidimensional. And I think we have to get out of our own minds and really believe that we can do this. So I built this conference from scratch. Like I just had this idea. I put it out there. I said, if I can get 100 women there, that would be awesome. I got 200 in the first hour. It crashed the
Wow.
server.
I bet
So
because they were so hungry for it because there's nothing out
yes,
there like it, right?
there's nothing like it. And
Wow.
it's very different than classic medical conferences. I mean, we get really real, really fast and we get to our internal growth. Like it's not about what's best for our patients. It's what's best for us. And when we are the best we will be the best doctors for our patients.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at the agenda of speakers. I'm like, ooh, some of these are juicy.
Yeah.
I was like, this looks
Yeah,
good.
they are.
Yeah. And so the conference is 2 days.
It's 3. It's like 2.5, but yes. And I also have retreats. So I do a small retreat in January for women. That's amazing too, all about wellness and well-being. And
Mm.
it's just amazing to see what happens. It's so powerful just to walk in the room and be surrounded by that many powerful, brilliant women. I mean, as you know, like the
Yeah.
synergy, just walking into the room. I always say, like, I could stand up and just recite the alphabet and it would probably be just as good of a conference because
Right.
it's the women in the room that just gathering of that many women, and it normalizes our experiences.
Right.
So when people start sharing things that they've encountered, all of a sudden they realize, wait, that's happened to me. It's not me. It's the
Right.
system, right? Like,
Right. And I bet this year now more than ever, people are just going to want to be able to share and like have
mhm.
breakout groups and really connect
Right.
with each
Yes.
other.
And I think there's such a Like, I love that you're doing this, because I think people right now, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anxiety. And
Yes.
I think that we need to hear messages of hope,
Right.
and that we still can control ourselves. We can control what happens next. We can control our attitudes and our energy, and we can still improve ourselves and grow during this time. Like, we don't all just need to freeze and like not do anything,
Right.
because I think that's kind of the messaging that's in the mainstream media right now. It's so fear, like
Right.
there's so much fear. So I love that you're doing this.
And just the first thing that you said, that you were not scared and that you believe that we're going to be able to get it under control, that just like wiped, like just this whole, I got chills, because it was like, I've been living because of what the news is feeding us.
Mm-hmm.
Can I go outside? Will I ever go out? Like, it's so terrifying to think that your life is going to be inside your living room. But the fact that
Right.
you said, because you see what's actually happening, not what's politically or whatever dictated
Right.
to us by whatever agenda. And so I really appreciate that hope, and that you're giving these doctors a place to share and to be inspired, and also to know that their emotions that they're feeling are valid. Because one
Yeah.
of the things that I have learned going through my own trauma is that when I don't express my emotions is when I get sick. So
Yeah.
it's okay if you're scared or angry or
Yeah.
frustrated, and to have that group. I could see you doing like a monthly membership thing with the Brave Enough, where everybody does something like that.
Yeah, I know. I've been actually kind of creating some new content in the last month, and I realized like there's so much power with continuity of community right now, and thinking about doing that membership, because I think that it's really hard in 2020, first of all, to show up every day as yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Like, you got to have courage just to show up
I
as
don't
who
even
you
have
are,
face
right?
powder. I'm out of it. I'm like, whatever. It's not about me. It's about you.
So I think that we really need that leaders to come up and say like, hey, like today I struggled to get in the shower,
Right.
but I still was able to encourage people by giving them a positive message. One of the most powerful things to me that has been an aha moment is thinking about that I can be working on myself and inspiring people at the same time.
Yes. Wonderful.
It's
Yes.
so free to think that.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
you can have this amazing podcast, you can have this amazing speakership series where you train people amazing courses, and you can have this huge public voice and also be working on yourself
Right.
and
Right.
and working through your own thing. Like,
Right.
that's okay. It's okay to do both of those things.
Right. Don't wait till you're perfect, because you're never going to be perfect at
Amen,
all.
sister. Amen.
And that's why they need to read your book. So I know a lot of speakers that they've written books for like years, and they're just never publishing it because they don't think it's good enough or whatever. How did you get to the point of coming up with the concept of the book, writing your book, and getting it out there?
So I hope so many people that are listening, I hope every person reaches out and grabs the book right now, especially because it's a workbook. So there's
Give me the
specific
website. I'll type it in the comments right now.
there it's you can find it at, just go to becomebraveenough.com, and
Okay.
it'll take you to Amazon and you can purchase it. It's called Between Grit and Grace. And the reason I wrote it how I did, which has an internal questions and kind of an internal checklist throughout the chapter, is because when I was going through that year of trying to put myself back together and learn how to say no and forgive myself for my failures and start living authentically who I was instead of what everyone else told me I should be, I read about 30 self-help books. And
Me
specifically,
too.
yeah, I specifically read them from a woman's perspective. And
Right.
one book would tell me I needed to be super strong and super powerful and be the bitch. And then the next one
Uh,
would say like, oh, don't talk until the very end of the meeting, and make sure you don't wear red, and dress this way. And one would tell me to lean in, the other one would tell me not to lean. I mean, it was just crazy. And I was like, I have like personality whiplash after the end of this. So I thought, if I was going to tell a message, what would it be? And I think that most of us, specifically for women, are on this spectrum of being gritty and having grit, because there's times in our life where we have to be gritty. Just showing up every day requires grit. And then grace, like we have to forgive ourselves and we have to forgive
right.
others. But so often we're pushed to one side or the other. We put ourselves in these boxes like, she's a gritty woman, right? She's a leader. She's awesome, but I really wouldn't want to have coffee with her. But this woman, she's super nice. I'd love to have a glass of wine with her, but she can't really lead. The reality is that we have both of those attributes, and
Right.
we express those attributes differently at different times, and that's okay. So when I had this idea for the book, every publisher was like, pick one or the other. Women can't be both. And I'm like, yes, we can.
That's the whole point of the book.
That's the whole point. So I was lucky enough that I found a publisher who took me on, and the book. So I have questions in the book to really ask you, like, all about your authentic self, all about your past failures, and who you are and how you embrace both grit and grace.
I love, so it's not just a book you read, it's a book you work through and process and do. And I think, yeah, and that's one of the things that makes you such a great leader, because you're strong, but then you're also compassionate. It's the feminine, the masculine energies that you talked about in your emotional intelligence speech, which was so riveting. Yeah, I love it. I was like taking notes. I was like, oh my God, this is good. Taking pictures of it. So I really hope that those of you who are listening are not just listening, but are inspired, because I believe in taking inspired action. I'm interviewing Dr. Sasha not because she is just an incredible, amazing woman, a mentor to me, but also that you will hear something she said and say, you know what, she's right. It's my time to put myself out there as a speaker. It's my time to do a conference. It's my time to write a book, or it's my time to know that failure doesn't mean anything, but that I can learn from it, to get on the bus, like you told your son, right? Get on that bus, and we have to just get back in there. Right? Because at one point you were like wanting to just let go of your role as a physician, right?
Yeah. I mean, isn't that scary that after all those years of training and all those hours I put in, I was so miserable, I wanted to quit. I mean, I would have quit. If you would have come to me and said, you can pay your rent tomorrow and quit your job as a doctor, it's not like it was just the job. It wasn't just the environment. I just didn't even want to practice medicine. That was such a wake-up call for me. And now it's interesting because I'm more myself, and I love my job. I love taking care of patients, know? So I think that it starts from within. We have to figure out how we can embrace our own unique story. And we're all unique. We all have unique stories and experiences. So that's why it's so important, if you're listening, don't wait. Just take those small actionable steps to develop your course, or become a speaker, or start a conference, or publish that book. It's your story has significance.
Yeah. And I definitely am going to invite, one of my best friends is an anesthesiologist here in Beverly Hills, Dr. Pat, and I'm going to let her know about your conference. And any of you that are interested, when is your conference and how can they sign up?
It's September 10th through September 13th, and they can go to braveenoughconference.com.
And then they can also find information if they want to join the Facebook group and all of that.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And then go to YouTube and watch her TED Talk. Or is there TED Talk on your website too?
Yeah, and it's on YouTube or my website. Yes.
Yeah, go to her website and you'll be able to find everything. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and this has definitely been inspirational to me. I'm so grateful to not have to live in fear anymore, because what you said, it's all going to be, I'm just going to rewind the part of the podcast. She's like, it's going to be fine. Okay. I've been working in the hospital. I'm fine. You guys are going to be fine. We're going to get through this.
We will.
Yeah. Any advice for new speakers just starting out that, to get started? One last word.
I would say practice. I still practice when I'm getting ready to give a talk. I still kind of run through it. Don't try to rehearse the perfect talk, because it doesn't exist, right? So just get, and the thing that I always think is, like, no one in the audience knows if I messed up. Right. Like, nobody in the audience knows that I forgot to say this thing. They don't know that. So just give yourself grace and start somewhere and get out there, because your voice is significant.
Exactly. I agree, because when I tried to practice the perfect speech, it never would come out. So I just practiced the outline of it, and then it's just perfect. So there's the website, right? BecomeBraveEnough.com.
Correct.
So,
Thank you.
you cannot miss it, all right? Everybody tuning in on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes. This podcast is actually going out to the masses, and my intention is that you will have at least one action item that you can take to get your message out, because I believe everyone has a specific message, that you are a messenger for a message, and not to let fear or the fear of failure or the imposter syndrome stop you, like Dr. Sasha said. I want to let you know that I am here to support you. One of the things that I am giving away on my website is a webinar, free webinar on the 5 mistakes new speakers make and how to avoid them. You could just get them at deborahderas.com, download that webinar, and every Wednesday I have free webinars for you to be able to support you to grow. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, with the power of synergy, anything is possible. Ciao. Bye.